Hey, this is episode number 53 of Gen X Amplified, and today we are chatting with Katrina Wong, who is the head of marketing for Hired, which is a Silicon Valley tech company. And we're going to be talking about not only her extensive experience as a marketer for multiple tech organizations, but also how to effectively lead as a Gen Xer in today's multi-generational workforce. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
A major differentiator for any Gen X manager is that you can manage the next generation well, right? The Gen Y, the Gen Z, and with all things being equal, you really will stand out.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified. This is the podcast dedicated to amplifying and giving a voice to the very powerful generation between those brilliant boomers and magnificent millennials. And as always, thank you so much for listening, subscribing to the podcast. I truly appreciate it. So today we are going to geek out a little bit about marketing. But not only marketing, we're going to also geek out about being a Gen Xer in the corporate world, because my guest has spent over 15 years in a variety of customer-facing roles, including marketing, go-to-market, and revenue growth for both B2B and B2C SaaS and enterprise software companies. She is currently the VP of marketing at Hired, which is a career marketplace that matches tech talent with the world's most innovative companies. At Hired, she leads all marketing efforts, including brand, product marketing, demand generation, user acquisition, retention, lifecycle, content marketing, and communications. Prior to becoming Hired at Hired, before she became Hired at Hired, she worked in marketing leadership positions across a variety of large organizations and other various startups. So without further ado, please welcome my Gen Exceptional guest all the way from Silicon Valley, Katrina Wong. Katrina, how are you doing?
Doing well. Oh my gosh, what a great opening. Thank you. Yes, doing really well.
That's awesome. That's
happy
great
to be on today, and thank you for having me as a guest.
No, it's my pleasure. We connected sometime a while back, actually, and had some great conversations back and forth via email, social. We had a call. And, it was just two marketing souls.
I know.
Two Gen X marketing souls connected.
I've been telling my friends about this podcast too. And I'm like, I'm so excited to talk about just being a leader in today's workforce and what that means, and how things have changed. So anyway, I'm looking forward to the dialogue.
No, I love that. That is so awesome. And those are the things that we love to talk about, that I personally love to talk about. And a lot of times we don't get a chance to really unpack that perspective of being a leader in this multi-generational workforce. But before we do that, speaking of workforce, I would love for you, Katrina, just to, again, unpack your story and just your journey, professional journey, what led you to work at Hired, becoming Hired at Hired in your role as Vice President of Marketing.
Sure. So, squarely a Gen Xer, I actually started my career, I want to say more than 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, I really wasn't a technologist or a marketer when I first started. I studied the life sciences, and then before I knew it, the internet boom hit. And I honestly can't remember much before the internet boom. But once that hit, I realized that I really wanted to be in a field where the sky's the limit. And I worked for a company during the boom that we just put, brick and mortar stores online for the first time. And that was amazing.
Okay.
Shortly after that, Salesforce recruited me And that was where I truly caught the bug as a marketer, because Mark Benioff at the time kept pounding this excessive message about the end of software.
Right.
And this is 2004. So, kind of the early days, and just anything being on the internet and the cloud was still relatively new. But what I noticed was the media just gobbled it up. And our customers came, right? And that's when I made that connection. I was like, wow, the impact of language, right? Really, me recognizing that changed the trajectory of my career, right? And I was like, that's truly what marketing is, right?
Yes.
Like the power of the language. So from there, I went through a couple of roles in marketing. Was at SAP when we launched our first, cloud product, and then at Zora, which that was an interesting company. A few of us were Salesforce alumni, and it was the same thing. We created a movement. We called it the subscription economy well before anyone was buying services as a subscription, right? So think of like the Netflix of the world and how that took out Blockbuster. So we coined it, made it mainstream, and just even last year, the company went public. So then fast forward, I've been in software most of my career, and I ended up at Hired because I was really I wanted to do more than software, and I wanted to be at a company where the mission really resonated with me, like truly. And so our mission is to find a job for everyone that they love. And I was like, wait, is that really even possible for everyone? But, it's always nice to aim high. And that's what we do. We are, simply put, like the Uber for job search, right? We match, instead of passengers with drivers, right? Or Lyft, instead of matching passengers with drivers, we match, tech talent, software engineers, and other roles too, with top companies that are hiring for them. Wow. So I really can't be happier. It's been an amazing ride. For sure.
No, definitely. You've had some significant opportunities and experiences, especially as a marketer, being on the forefront of tech during some watershed moments. You mentioned at SAP, you were part of the launch of the first cloud product. I believe you said that.
For SAP,
which is
their
cool.
On-demand business product.
Wow. And you are an alum of the University of what I consider to be awesome, phenomenal branding, especially when it comes to tech at Salesforce. I mean, as a brand guy myself, I'm always touting Salesforce as a great case study when it comes to having a brand that transcends just product, and especially a B2B brand, because most of the time when you think of branding, especially for B2B companies, there's not a lot of personality. There's not a lot of, just really emotional connection. And I talked a little bit about that during a previous interview I had with Bill Masitis from Yes. And we talked because he's a huge brand guy, and at the same time, a phenomenal marketer. But your experience as well, I just think that, and I'm a fan of Mark as well as a leader, you've had some phenomenal experiences, especially coming from a totally different field that you were thinking about going into with respect to life sciences, you said, right? Wow.
That's right. On the branding bit, it's I agree, right? Like branding for B2B companies is tricky. But what I'm starting to see, and this topic could be a whole different podcast by itself, is the blending of just personal life and professional business life is real, right? And what we're seeing on the marketing front is B2C and B2B blending as well. So a lot of really cool tactics that you typically leverage in the consumer world, we're starting to leverage, right, for B2B, for the business person. Because at the end of the day, right, if I'm engaging on my mobile phone, right, and what that experience is, whatever is attractive, the bells and whistles, right? Why should selecting a business product or service be any different?
Correct.
So, so a lot of our campaigns kind of use elements from the consumer world, which I really wasn't able to do quite a few years ago. So very exciting stuff.
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned too, which is I find fascinating, and I agree with you that now there tends to be more emphasis on the blending and intersection of personal life and professional life. A lot of times I do talk a lot about personal branding, especially that is actually a passionate part of what I do professionally, is helping especially mid-career professionals really amplify their brand so they can accelerate their growth in the marketplace. But, with B2B companies, I think about Salesforce, like I cannot separate Salesforce brands from Mark's brand and his personal brand.
That's right.
They're
That's
so
right.
intertwined. And nowadays you tend to see that, especially in tech, whether it's Zuckerberg and Facebook or Dorsey and Twitter, and some of these other brands that are coming out in the forefront, even hardware with T-Mobile and oh my God, John. I mean, so
That's right.
You just right. And a lot of times, and I talk a lot about brand personality, but a lot of times that personality may mimic the founder's personality and may not. Like with Slack, there really isn't a brand personality to the founder, but the brand has personality. So it's just interesting you mentioned that. And I do love the fact that you highlighted, even with B2B, individuals and business leaders that want to interface with other B2B companies, there has to be this connection that's there.
That's right. The emotional connection. That was always the case, right, with, consumer brands. But
Right.
I think the bar is high, right, with the advances of technology, right? People are always online, always connected.
Yes.
So they expect that emotional connection to be there for every type of connection, whether it's in my personal life or in my business life.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I love too. No, it's interesting. You mentioned too, you are quintessential cornerstone Gen Xer. And what I loved also what you said that deserves, really reinforcing is that when you started working for Hired, you were searching for more of a purpose-driven experience at this stage in your career. And that to me is one of the virtues and attributes that I find for people in our generation. When you reach a certain stage in your career professionally, whether you have worked on your job for 10, 20 years or in various companies, but when you get to a point, you start to look for something beyond just a paycheck and something that's more fulfilling. And it sounds like that's what happened with you. And you gravitated toward the mission of this company, which I love. You said the mission for Hired is to find a job for everyone that they love. Like there's no marketing speak, there's no business speak and just bland. It's pretty simple, elementary, but makes perfect sense.
I know it's incredibly rewarding. And I do think that, to your point, right, much later in your career, you start realizing that it is important to, mentor others. Mm-hmm. And I get a lot of gratification from just managing and mentoring others at the company, on my team. And I also do a lot of just mentoring outside of the company as well. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, what I spend a lot of my free time doing. It's been rewarding.
Well, it sounds like a great company. So it's a marketplace that I guess think of like a dating site. you match prospects, job candidates with prospective employees, right? But it's just to clarify, particularly in the tech space, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's so funny that you brought up the dating analogy. Mm-hmm. We're like eHarmony. So there is a longer questionnaire that you fill out to set up your profile. Okay. It's about 4 screens long, but we really dive into what motivates somebody at their job. Okay. And it's, it turns out we have a lot of data around this. There's so much more than salary, right? Mm. But similar to our, eHarmony, you do it, ask a lot of questions. And the 4 top roles that we that we service are software engineers, data scientists, product management, and design, UI, UX.
Okay, got it. So those are the 4. That's pretty much definitely in the tech world. What would you say would be the most responses or people out of those 4 areas? Would you say is the top winner, if you will?
software engineers. It wasn't until I joined this company that I realized that there is a true shortage of engineers in the world. We're international.
Okay.
We're only in 2 other markets outside of the U.S., or actually 3, but that shortage is real. So we're certainly really servicing a need there for our employers.
Wow. And it's mostly like full stack? Is it just a variety of different?
A variety of skills, mostly full stack,
Okay.
but it's both the front end as well as the back end.
Got it. And what would you say would be, speaking generationally, out of the candidates, would you say considered to be more millennials, Gen Zs that are just coming out, boomers? What would you say would be the percentage?
Combination of millennials and Gen Zs that are just graduating. But yes, mostly millennials, because we offer a lot of transparency with salary upfront. So that's kind of been a nice little hook for anyone looking for a job. You start negotiations on the right foot.
Right.
And it's been the whole experience has been very attractive and relevant to today's workforce.
Right.
It's how they want to search for a job, just like how you can pick up your phone and order a car to take you from point A to point B, right? That's what we strive for, right? Like a very nice, seamless, guided experience that's efficient and fast. Yeah. So some engineers come onto our platform and they get, offers within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And they get interview requests within days, and they'll get up to 25 or more. So the world has changed and we are moving very fast. Granted, Silicon Valley always seems to be, on the bleeding edge of that.
Right. Wow. Exactly. Well, this is a great, I guess, pivot into, or more unpacking of this, because I want to talk to you about this two-sided marketplace that you work on for both employers and employees, specifically when it comes to people in our generation. So obviously, based on these 4 areas of job opportunities when it comes to working for tech companies, engineers, data scientists, you said product management, I believe was the third one.
Yes,
and product management and designers. Very familiar with all 4 of those based on a previous role that I had as a CMO. I think what's interesting, obviously those roles you are going to get more of the millennial generation that can serve those roles. But I think a lot of principles that we can teach people that tend to be in our generation would apply when it comes to navigating the job search world. And also this new world that we live in when it comes to searching for employment. Like you mentioned earlier, it's a new day. People can go now to their phone, download an app, fill out a profile or on desktop. And within 2 weeks, they can be sitting and filling out their welcome papers for the organization.
That's
to right. And as opposed to when we were first starting off in our careers, I tell you, I remember going to Kinko's, getting 20 to 50 printouts of my resume.
I was mailing them.
You used to get oh my God, get the linen
library at college my senior year to look through brochures to understand. I'm really dating myself. I love it. And when I tell my team, they're like, but Katrina, they can't comprehend. They're like, what? Went to the library? I'm like, yes, because I graduated right before the internet was on mainstream. So, and companies didn't even have pages for themselves yet, websites for themselves yet. So we went to the local library, right? Or I'm sorry, the university library to go look at brochures for companies to understand and then write letters in. Like the cover letter was a very real thing.
Oh my God. It brings back memories for me. I was talking about Kinko's earlier. I literally would go to Kinko's and ask for the linen resume paper.
Yes.
And with the envelopes, type it in, fold them up.
Mine was off-white.
Off-white. Everybody did the off-white. Yeah, the off-white linen.
The A crew.
Sometimes I thought about getting the marble looking one, but that was too gaudy. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I do remember. It's so funny for us to stand out. I know. But that's what we did. We wanted to get the job. But now it is a different world. And so this is important because, like, you still have your Randstads, you still have Kinko's, FedEx Kinko's nowadays, but the world has changed. And I think it's really imperative for people that are in our generation
that are out in the job search marketplace, because a lot of them are, or they're in companies and they're feeling a little squeeze, or they're not feeling confident in their trajectory. So they're always in job search mode. Even right now with the unemployment rate being very low, they're still, I mean, I get messages all the time based on what I do with my work from people that are mid-career, and they're feeling stuck. They're feeling like they're either being passed over for work, or they're applying for jobs that they feel they're not getting, and they know they're like, I know I'm overqualified for this. And it's just the nature of this mid-career phase, especially with Gen X, being stressed and squeezed. But a lot of what I do and talk about when it comes to like building your personal brand to be more effective is really looking at refining your skills, making sure that you're up to date with your skills. Can you talk a little bit about, since you sit on that side of this two-sided marketplace as well, and as a Gen Xer, how critical or is it to really be attuned to this new technology digital world when it comes to job search?
Yeah, here are a couple of things I would love to share, right? It's not as hard as we may think, right? Because sometimes, as a Gen Xer, I'm like, okay, what am I doing to stay relevant? What am I, right? I really come at it as there are more similarities, working in today's world than there are differences to, when we first started working. Exactly. And honestly, a major differentiator for any Gen X manager is that you can manage the next generation, right? Well. Right? Yes. The Gen Y, the Gen Z, and with all things being equal, you really will stand out if you can manage them better. So simple things like, with the advances of technology and the lightning speed that we're moving at, right, the ability to relate and to keep current with how we communicate goes a long ways. So an example is, most of my communication is now over Slack versus email. And I find that is less effective when I send an email because it's slow. It's really like a push versus a pull, right? So everything goes on Slack, and that's a really small tweak, and it's pretty easy, right? But I do find that some Gen X and baby boomer, management, that's just not how they operate. They never check their Slack, right? People have to still walk over to their desk to get an answer. Right. That's really, really hard for today's workforce because just move quicker.
Yes,
right.
Yes. No, that's great advice. I mean, I agree with you. I think, and I've seen it firsthand. And, for me personally, I mean, I'm just a digital geek or guy, so I adapt to those technologies pretty easily. But not a lot of people do. And I've used Slack. I've used Microsoft Teams. I'm actually a Slack fan. I like both. But there are a lot of Gen Xers who, if they are in the workforce now, and you have to adapt, you have to communicate with your teams. And let's say that Slack is the new platform of choice for the group, for the team. How would you advise that Gen Xer that has some trepidation and feels that well, it's not really important, and it's too hard to learn? Would you recommend them maybe partnering up in a mentee role, if you will, with a millennial for training, or just to look online? Like, how do you get over that hesitation? Or for the Gen Xer that's not in the workforce, that's looking and has a nervousness because they are not aligned with these new technologies.
Yeah, I have this mantra, and as integrated as I may think that I am, or, that's just my perception, right? I wake up every day and I, half kiddingly say this to myself. I'm like, if you can't beat them, join them, right? There is Slack is easy to adapt, and maybe not for everyone. It is a behavioral change, right? But there are real skills and skills development, skill gaps that may exist, right? If you've had a job for a decade and all of a sudden you switch jobs and, the technology stack is different. Even as a marketer, right, the technology is a real there are real advances. Like, what do I use for my marketing automation? How do I set that up? Right. But what I love about what's available today is Coursera or Udemy, right? Very inexpensive courses that are quick to kind of go through. And so the options to self-learn are amazing.
They are, yes.
And it's in bite-sized, chunk-size content that's easily consumable, right? Sometimes the videos are like 2-3 minutes long, and I'm like, oh, that's how you do something. So I would say start there, and then I'm a strong fan of just peer-to-peer learning and peer-to-peer mentoring, right? And so being able to join groups or belong to organizations or build your own network if possible to kind of learn from your peers, routinely, at least once a month, I'll get on a call with 12 other, or so VPs of marketing or CMOs at different tech startups. And we talk about the challenges, right? So some of it is, hey, what is the latest tech you guys are using to measure something? Right. How do you present, your funnel metrics or whatever it might be. Right. And so, but I love the fact that I could just go on Udemy or Coursera and just learn something quickly.
It is. I mean, this is definitely the U economy and the learning economy. And I preach that all the time. And I'm glad you mentioned that as well, is that you really have to look at your skills. If you want to stay competitive in this marketplace, in the workplace, even if you're an entrepreneur, you have to refine and look at your technical skills and even your transferable skills, what I call your human skills, your soft skills. And a lot of us as Gen Xers, we have those intuitively, whether it's relationship building, discernment, but marrying those skills with being up to date with those tech skills. I mean, you can become a force to be reckoned with. And it's so easy now, whether you, like you said, go online, go to Udemy, go to these sites, go on YouTube, get a coach, get a mentor, and even learn internally from your colleagues that happen to be millennials and Gen Zs, because that's the world they know. And speaking of that, because you mentioned that earlier, so I want to unpack that further, just about how you believe in peer-to-peer mentoring. And as a leader, now you being a Gen X leader in an organization, I'm assuming, well, I don't want to assume, do you have millennials or maybe some Gen Zs that work on your team that you work with, that you lead?
Yes, I do. So our team at Hired and Marketing is 25. It's a 25-person team. Okay. And I would say maybe there are 2 other Gen Xers, and everyone else is squarely, Gen Y, millennials, or Gen Z even. So it is, it's some of the stuff we've talked about is an everyday thing for me. Okay. Yeah.
And how do you navigate that? So what are some of your, I guess, words of wisdom and best practices of navigating as a Gen X leader to remain not only relevant, but effective as a leader, leading a group of very passionate, and again, and I don't, I say this all the time, I don't hold, a lot of these, I don't believe in stereotypes for one, but, I don't hold it against a group of millennials that happen to be passionate or aggressive, for lack of a better word, because, I applaud that. But you as a Gen X leader, you have to learn how to navigate that to be effective. How have you done that?
That's right. That is key, because I think the skills and everything else just is table stakes, but how you communicate and how you provide feedback is a world of a difference, right? And so with feedback, the way that I think about it, and I'm a big subscriber of this, and this isn't new to this generation, right? The philosophy of being really a service leader, right? A servant leader is kind of what I, subscribe to. So oftentimes when I provide feedback, I am leaning in and leading with the positive, right? Because everything else, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I do think that the world is moving a lot quicker, right? And so I think feedback given in real time when possible seems to be what my team really appreciates. Okay. Right. And sometimes this is just even over Slack, believe it or not, right? But we meet very frequently, once a week, and it's two-way feedback too, right? So you have to be very open to that. Okay. So I provide feedback. Most of it's positive. In areas of improvement, I provide context and I explain. And it's really a two-way dialogue. And if you get that right, it really is beautiful, because you do see growth, right? both, and here's the kicker, both in who you're managing and oftentimes, for yourself too. And I love that when there's that even exchange, right? I think that's what makes it motivating and inspiring, right? I'm not going to be that perfect leader, right? I don't know everything. and they see me struggle with Instagram, right? Because, as a marketer, that's like the platform of choice.
Right.
I'll put something on and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't get back to whatever, right? And they'll come over and help me.
You swiped right. And you're supposed to
laugh about it, right? So there is that like real engagement that's a little bit of a two-way street that works really well when you provide feedback. Because I think the outdated tops-down one-way street, right? Kind of how when we started, and again, I'm with you, I don't believe in stereotypes necessarily, but with the boomers, right? Or at least when I started, it was very much the please do this, do as I say, and thank you, right? Yes. Like I was scared to ask questions, right? And we've progressed, right, as humanity, and I'm glad that it's, a lot more, what's the right word? Collaborative. Yes. Right. So I think about it that way.
No, it was definitely, again, and I'm glad we were talking about this because true, I don't believe in full stereotypes, but at the same time, I do subscribe to, there are commonalities based on
I agree.
the area, and I have these conversations with people a lot when it comes to generations. And some people don't even believe in generations, and I get what they're saying. But that's why I never say that I paint all Gen Xers with the same brush. But if you grew up during the same era and you have the same type of experiences, you are shaped in certain things. That's just social. That's just social sciences. And that's just how it is. And it's true. Like growing up early in my career and throughout in the early parts of my career, it was definitely a different dynamic. It was more of a top down. You have mid-year review, you had year-end review, and that was pretty much your feedback that you've received as an employee. And you were surprised, and you were happily surprised or you were not pleasantly surprised because you didn't get the feedback. Now, you're right. There's a thirst for consistent, ongoing feedback that was, I believe, driven by the millennials when they came into the workforce based on how they were raised. And that's okay. And I think it's actually better. But as a Gen X leader, it's important to be an effective leader. You have to look at this relationship as a two-way relationship. Doesn't mean that you dilute your, leadership position.
That's right. Right. That's right.
Why you are hired in their role is to provide a certain level of experience and expertise to really drive growth. But at the same time, if you really want what's best for the organization, if you really want what's best for your relationship within your team, if you really want what's best as far as productivity, you have to consider the dynamic of the people that you manage and you work with. And I noticed that too, that the millennial generation, they welcome consistent, ongoing feedback. They want to know, how am I doing, or am I making a difference? Are there gaps? And if there are gaps, what do I need to do to fill in those gaps? And I think what it does, it challenges the leader, the Gen X leader or the boomer leader or whomever, to be a little bit more receptive, cognizant and discerning when it comes to what the team members are doing. So I'm glad you talked about that. I've managed millennials as well, and I have noticed that it's a different dynamic than the way we grew up. Very different. And you mentioned something too that was very interesting. You said during those, feedback experiences, you have also personally grew as a leader. What did you mean by that specifically? And what type of growth did you witness personally sometimes?
For me, it's really honing in on a management style of influence, right, versus the top-down approach, right? And I think because just getting the business results can be so difficult, right? And especially, when I first started, right? Because we didn't have technology and, there was just a lot of friction in doing business. Mm-hmm. Most of my energy was kind of spent on, how to drive the business results, and that extra layer of EQ, if you will, or just wasn't really there, right? It was easy just to say, hey, please get this done and just be done with it, right? And, to our points earlier about it being a two-way street, right? I've really grown in terms of, my management style of influence. I always believed in it, right? Mm-hmm. But now it's mostly a management style of influence.
Yes.
Right. But, you almost, it's like this fine line, right? As a leader, and this is a point that you were making, right? It's not fully delegating the leadership to the entire team. I mean, you have to make the tough calls and you have to truly be a leader. But how you communicate your thoughts, right, doesn't need to be so top down. I mean, I keep coming down to that, right? The top down versus the influence. So I've really grown as a leader who manages, I would say 90% of my management style is really by influence.
That's great. And it sounds like I'm assuming that it's been a welcoming style, that the feedback that you've received from your people, your peers and subordinates, if you will, has been positive. And because if you continue to do it, it's rendering some good results when it comes to productivity, relationships within your team, and obviously that makes a greater organization.
That's right. It's just been extremely rewarding and true to our mission, right? We do employee surveys.
Okay.
A couple of times, through the year. I want to say 2 to 3 times. And I will say, and, sometimes I'm a little embarrassed, right? Like talking about results, but our team is the happiest, most fulfilled, most satisfied, right? And getting the most in terms of results. Right? So that's been, because I've been at this company close to 2 years, so I'm, a new leader, and they've seen that. They've seen this management style and just working with the team this way and getting really like awesome results, right? Like, and we're very numbers driven, so it is kind of ranked, right? And so the highest marks for this. So as a marketer, and these days, marketing is even more data-driven, right, than just a few years ago. I was like, wow, this is almost like a social experiment. You can test out your style of management, get the numbers back, and see if it works, right? It's actually a marketing exercise. How do you market yourself as a Gen X manager, right, the right way during the interview, and when you get the job with your team? Because it's about scaling, right? You have to scale with the team.
You have to. That goes back to personal brand development. That's a big part of what I'm passionate about, is helping. You have to think about your personal brand, and your brand is really your personality. I mean, not your personality. I mean, your reputation. Your brand is really your reputation and the perception that people have of you, and that carries a lot of weight. If you're looking for work, if you're within a job, you have the opportunity to shape. You want to intentionally shape who you are, how you lead. Think about your brand DNA, your skills, how you market yourself, the relationships you develop, and just be consistent with it. And it goes a long way as a leader. Just from a marketing perspective, because again, I like to geek out on marketing. You mentioned, do you guys like review you have KPIs you review like on a weekly basis, monthly, like scorecard, as far as some of the data metrics that you determine for success?
Yeah, we're probably looking, believe it or not, at our metrics every day. We report out metrics once a week. Okay. With some departments, certainly by the month, and then we're evaluated against quarterly goals. So everything's really numbers driven, which reminded me of something. The transparency of the business is so much more than it was, a decade ago, and certainly way more when I first started working. But something about leading with data and the transparency also works in helping you support your messages or the points you're trying to make, right? The millennial generation. Just right prior to this podcast, you and I were talking about interesting campaigns. Yes. All of our, campaigns, we lead with data. So you can imagine, right? 3 million job seekers on our platform. We know all of the salaries that go out and all of the offers that are accepted, right? This is one example of a campaign we run leading with data, and it really resonates with the millennial generation. Is we know for every year for equal pay day what the true wage gap is. Wow. Not salary data that's been self-reported, but true actual data on our platform. The press loves it, and we ended up shooting and producing our own micro documentary. It was only 14 minutes long, and we surveyed candidates on our platform, and they share their equal pay story. And what was fascinating was that, and this is kind of a nice blend of both, millennials and then their parents, right? The Gen Xers. There were men, right, that have come out and said, I remember when my mom first, got promoted as a manager, and she had to ask for equal pay. And my dad didn't, right? So very moving stories like that. But the point is, leading with data also helps when you manage, right? Wow. I'm making this decision, or here's why I think we need to go in this direction because the data says X. That's been a very effective technique, and it's actually better for the business. We should be leading with data anyway. Yes,
we should. Yeah, it's a data-driven world if you want to be successful, and I love looking at the data. I mean, never before in any period in time, especially for marketers or just for businesses, the empirical information you have at your fingertips to really navigate your way to success has been never greater than it is right now. So I think I tell everyone, please take advantage of all the data points and call out the stories and the trend lines and the gaps and things that you need to do to make yourself successful. But see, I can talk about this stuff all day, but before, we can. But before I let you go, there is one non-marketing question that I ask all of my guests. Actually, it's somewhat marketing, it's somewhat branding. We'll see, that I do ask all of my guests at the end of each episode. So are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So Katrina, if there was a song that would play every time you enter a room or when you walk down the street that perfectly fits your story and the brand of Katrina Wong, what song would that be? What would be your own personal theme song?
Feel like drum roll. Destiny's Child, Independent Women. And I've been thinking about this because I want to see Beyonce's new Netflix documentary. I can't wait, right? But then I was like, you know what? I actually remember her from Destiny's Child, right? Many years ago, because that was kind of more, our generation. Yes. And so Independent Women, I just looked up the lyrics too. It even makes references to Charlie's Angels, right? Lucy Liu, Drew, Cameron Diaz, right? So I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. And it's just about, women being independent, right? And holding our own ground and making our own money and having a career. Like, I love that. Love it. That wasn't always the case for my parents' generation, right. But, very proud that as a Gen Xer, right, that we've had more opportunities unlocked for us than perhaps our parents.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. First of all, that's a great song. Everybody loves Beyonce.
I know. I'm really
everybody loves Beyonce. What's funny, actually, I saw a video yesterday. There's some viral video going around that there's a woman who doesn't like Beyonce. And
no, really?
It's a skit. And so she's at work and she's saying, oh, I don't like Beyonce. And the entire organization looks at her crazy. They fire her. Her dad throws away all of her luggage. It's a skit to basically say who doesn't like Beyonce. But
that's so funny. I love it. I'll have to look it up.
You gotta look that up. But it's true. Beyonce spans, I guess the phenomenalness, I just made up a word, of Beyonce spans across multiple generations. I remember when she first started, it's really young, and that song came out in the 90s, Independent Woman. And and you're right. Our parents and people before us, they couldn't. The women in older generations, especially whether it's boomer or silent, they really couldn't have that type of anthem. And I remember a song. I don't know if it was a woman-led song, but you can bring home the bacon fried up in a pan, and some commercial that came on. But it had a totally different vibe than now. So I think it's an awesome song, great theme song. Every time I hear it now, I got to think of Katrina Wong independent woman.
Thank you. This has been wonderful.
Love it.
Fully enjoyed our conversation. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So before you go, let everybody know how they can just keep up with you and what you're doing with your career and also the great things that your company's doing.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Catch Me Social. It's KATCH, me, MESOCIAL.
Okay.
I'm on Twitter. I'm pretty open with my networking, so feel free to find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And hired.com is just, www.hired.com.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, Katrina, you dropped lots of gems, lots of Gen X gems, and I've enjoyed this conversation. And thanks so much for spending time with me and our Gen X Amplified audience.
Thank you.
Take care. Okay, that was such a great chat and conversation with Katrina Wong, who is the head of marketing for Hired. I love it. I love it out there in the Silicon Valley area, the Bay Area. I gotta get back there soon. But anyway, great chat, great conversation, not only just about marketing stuff, which I love, but more importantly about how we as Gen Xers can be better leaders, more effective leaders, and lead by influence and inspiration, not by position, but by inspiration, especially in this multi-generational workforce. Cool. And make sure you go to genxamplified.com to get the show notes, to get all the links that we discuss, and to check out previous episodes of the podcast that you may have missed. And as always, thank you for listening. And besides genxamplified.com, you can also find the podcast on any of your favorite podcast app that you listen to, such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Luminary, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or wherever, again, you listen to podcasts. And if you've gotten value from Gen X Amplified, please, I beg you, I'm not begging, seriously, but I encourage you to go and give us a great rating and review so others can be made aware of the podcast so we can keep this movement going. And again, as mentioning movement, this is Gen X Amplified, the podcast dedicated to you, the powerful and exceptional generation between those brilliant boomers and magnificent millennials. And again, it is more than a podcast. It is a movement. Take care.